Hi, this is Jeff Blauette, technical agronomist with Cooperative Farmers Elevator, and in this week's Field Friday segment, thought we'd talk about what this weather's kind of been doing to our crops here with this excessive heat we've had. You know, we're out here sweating all the time, and it's just been quite a stretch of warm weather here, but wanted to talk about what that's maybe doing to us. Realistically, the corn crop is really good at telling us if something's going on or not. It's our job to figure out what it's telling us. And really what we've been seeing out in these cornfields, even in the afternoons when it's kind of the hottest part of the day and it's been through the heat all day, corn really seems fine yet. You know, I've been kind of watching here these afternoons and seeing, are we getting some rolling up of the leaves? Beans the same way. Do we get those beans turning the leaves upside down and kind of getting that grayish green look in the afternoons? Right now on the good soils, it seems like we're hanging in there pretty well. I think part of what we might be looking at is I think we had that, kind of a drier spring. We really didn't have an overabundance of moisture in most of our territory anyway. And we get down to, the subsoils and that, area where the roots can grow. They were growing probably down and deeper than average. I haven't dug any up, but just knowing what we know, when it was drier, those corn roots probably kept going down and down. So we probably have a pretty decent deep root system as long as there's no compaction layers or anything for it to fight. Well, then we had this, anywhere from 4.5 to 6.5, 7 inches of rain, a little bit ago. And obviously as dry as we were, that for the most part all went in. I think we're living off of that right now. I think the corn is telling us that it's still doing pretty well. This is the optimum time for a corn crop. When we're tasseling and silking and that, seeing what we can get done with pollination and kernel set, we're using, in weather like this, we're probably using a little over 3/10 of an inch of rain a day. So an inch of rain lasts about 3 days for what this corn crop's using. These warm nights, you get that transpiration, where our humidity comes from the crop acres. So we're using a lot of moisture right now, and the fact that the crop is happy yet seems to be a good sign. It kind of looks like in the forecast, it looks like we have about, a couple, 3 more days where we got some pretty high heat, and then maybe cooling down some. We'll see once what the extended forecast, there's some differing models on what's out there for temperatures, as we get a week down the road, but it looks like next week may be a little cooler. We've looked at corn for a long time. We used to always worry so much, and we still worry about it, but the pollination weather, if we get hot, dry weather during pollination won't work very well. We've had some really poor conditions during pollination before, and pollination almost always seems to be pretty good. We actually get the pollination done. We used to worry about if the silk's going to come out in time to catch the pollen, and in dry weather, the silks are late and delayed in emerging, so the pollen's dropping and the silks aren't there yet, and then we might miss some of that pollination synchronization. We really don't see that much anymore. It seems like we'll almost always see silks before we see tassels anymore, and that never used to be. I think that's kind of all our breeding and getting into some of the more drought tolerant, stress tolerant techniques that they're breeding this corn to be, and that's probably why we see that. What we do see though is we pollinate really well typically. But what'll happen maybe that first 10 days after pollination, that's when that tip kernels start to abort. That plant's kind of going through a window where it decides how many kernels do I think I can feed. So if this heat and stress continues and we do run out of some of that moisture down below, then we start running into more of the tip back where you can tell those kernels pollinated but they aborted and then they just shrivel up and aren't productive. So that'll be the next window we'll see, and it'll be interesting what we get. Obviously we'd all like to see a couple inches of rain here. Not a great rain chance in the forecast yet, so we'll see. But if it does cool down, that plant needs, probably 15% less water per day if we would get down into the 80-degree highs and, maybe some upper 50s for lows would help us in that early grain fill. We talked last week about tassel timing and fungicide applications, one of the things that we do see with fungicides typically is they kind of call it the plant health effect. What fungicides will do is they will suppress that ethylene production in that plant, and that's kind of a stress hormone that that plant creates. And if we're suppressing that, the plant doesn't, stress out quite as quick. We're basically fooling it into thinking, no, you're fine, keep growing and keep putting yield on, and hopefully we can get to that next favorable weather pattern. But just wanted to talk about that with this heat we're all going through. Yeah, I wasn't real smart today wearing a black shirt out here in this hot sun, but so far the corn crop's telling us we're doing fine. We'll see what it looks like going forward. But with that, that's this week's Field Friday segment, and we'll see you next week.